10th of 10 teams. And the Italian skier passed the USA guy with about 200 feet or 200 yards left to go. He got passed for last place.
Like I said, it takes work. Our guys are
Yeah.
gonna do it.
You guys have
If
your,
it's fun,
have your microphones?
we're pretty good at that.
Microphones on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go. We're
Waiting on you.
let's call the meeting to order. It's 1 p.m. exactly. The regular board meeting on Wednesday, February 28th. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Last time I had her sing the national anthem.
How'd that go?
Went well.
Okay, item 2 on our agenda is public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration.
You want to do roll call?
Oh, let's do roll call. Mona. Thank you, Terry.
Present.
Here.
Here.
I'm here.
Here. Okay, that was item 1 on our agenda. Now to item 2, public comments. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Any public comment today?
Good afternoon, Elaine St. John. I am in Russ Thomas's district. Anyway, yesterday I brought up something to the Board of Supervisors that I wanted to let you know about too. And it is Assembly Bill 2975. And this bill was authored by an Assemblywoman from Southern California who was on the Board of Directors for the Metropolitan Water District for 7 years. And it is concerning wild and scenic. And what basically the bill does is, should it pass, of course, that if the federal government takes any kind of action to take a wild and scenic designation away, that California can do something about that. So basically it would go to a public hearing, and then the state can take any necessary, and any was the thing that bothered me, action to take the river back to being wild and scenic, or it can also be recreational. So I brought copies of that bill. And the other thing I wanted to clear up too is last time when I was here, I mentioned that there was a previous supervisor that spoke about wild and scenic. And I went back to the tape from March 18th of 2015 for our Board of Supervisors, and it was actually Supervisor Carl Rodfer that made the comments about wild and scenic. And his comments were the unintended consequences of a special designation of wild and scenic. And I talked to him, and he said, I talked to him on Sunday, and he said, yes, that's exactly what happened. So I'm going to quote what he said, excuse me, in 2015. The rim fire broke out in Clavey Canyon. Clavey River feeds into the Tuolumne Wild and Scenic. And although it was not a wild and scenic, the U.S. Forest Service probably makes it treat any tributary into a wild scenic with the same actions that are pertinent to wild and scenic. That included not dropping fire retardant into the canyon of Clavey when the fire was small and manageable. So the fire escaped the canyon. So I didn't know exactly who said that last time I was here, but now we know it was Carl, and we know that's what he said.
And he's Tuolumne County Supervisor.
Tuolumne County Supervisor, and this is the Tuolumne River, which is wild and scenic. Now, he didn't say whether or not it was a state wild and scenic or a federal wild and scenic, but that is my concern. My concern is that, you know, wild and scenic does have special provisions, and there would be collateral damage if you can't stop a fire. Collateral damage of wildlife, of horses and cattle, and not only people's property and people, but all those things. So I wonder what the end game is. I know that in Carmel Valley, the San Clemente, dam was taken down, and I know that the Klamath River, there are 4 dams that they want to take down too. So I think the end game with the whole Wild and Scenic is to take dams down, because they want, it sounds like a really nice thing, Wild and Scenic, but I think that's the end game. So anyway, here are the, that's the 2975 that just came out last week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elaine. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. Item 3A is approved to declare district vehicles and equipment surplus. And 3B is approved position of opposed less amended on Senate Bill 623, Water Quality, Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, and the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Act Budget Trailer Bill. And I know the reason that that one's in our consent agenda is because we've already acted on that as a board. This is an action item. Looking for a motion.
Move for acceptance.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mona, will you take roll?
Yes. Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Enderl?
Yes.
And Director Bradley?
Yes. Okay, move on 4A, new business, discussion action regarding state legislation in 2018-19 session. Joel Metzger, Manager of External Affairs, Conservation and Grants. Thank you, Joel.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and members of the board. I'm pleased to bring this item before you. This is staff's recommendation and the Legal Affairs Committee's recommendation to support a resolution for both the 2 state water bonds that are planned to be on the ballot for June of this year and the second for November of this year. While not all of the more than $10 billion that the bonds would make available would be immediately accessible to us, a very large portion of them would be accessible to us in the form of grants to us directly, but also to organizations such as the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. These bonds would make funds available for disadvantaged communities as well, which is a big portion of Calaveras County, and that would be helpful to us. They also focus in on things like forest management. We have a tree mortality problem and also just a simple overgrowth of forest problem. Working with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy and others, these bonds could make quite a bit of money available to start to proactively bring our forests back into a more healthy state before they are destroyed by wildfire. And so, after analyzing these bonds and working with the Association of California Water Agencies, which, by the way, their board supported this unanimously, we are recommending that this board pass a resolution of support for both the June bond and the November bond. And if the board does choose to do so, we will pass this along to Aqua, and we will help in their statewide effort to support these bonds and encourage voters to pass them and allow these funds to be accessible to us and others throughout the state.
Move for acceptance.
No second?
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion here at board level? I would like to just point out the table that they show us, which is the third page in comparison of these, that they do provide money available for this area in the form of forest protection, potential safe water drinking, the SIGMA implementation, which is a big one for us, and possibly conservation. I think it is very, very helpful, and thank you for bringing this to us, Joel. Any public comment on this item? Okay, Mona, will you take roll, please?
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Enderl?
Yes.
And Director Bradley?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Passes 5-0. Old business. Discussion direction regarding cost of service and rate design analysis. Jeff Meyer.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. The item before you today is a continuing item to discuss the cost of service study and follows up on the meeting on February 14th, where your board gave direction to Sean Korn of HDR is to look at different options, specifically in regards to rate design, smoothing options, and how that would affect the bottom line as far as rates are concerned. Sean is going to give a presentation to follow up on that, and our hope is that we get some direction from your board to move this forward and continue our effort to refine and bring back to you the proposed rates for both water, sewer, and in this case today, we're also going to start looking at the drought surcharge and agricultural rates. Sean?
Thank you, Jeff. President Ratterman, board members, appreciate the time once again to be chatting in front of you. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm going to talk real briefly about the policy that direction that we gained last time, and then we're really going to dive right into the numbers. And so we really have three key components. We have our overall rate design, the rate level, and that transition plan that we've been talking about as part of that. And then we'll take a look at how that impacts various levels of consumption on the water side and what that equivalent charge changes to on sewer. So we're down on the bottom half. We have a little bit on the top part, but we're finalizing that financial planning aspect. And since we met last, we really crunched some numbers and we've got some actual rates. And that's the key aspect of the study is when we look at cost of service, the goal is to come back with an equitable and proportional allocation of costs. And so that's why we needed to tie down those loose ends at the last meeting, was to determine what are our customer classes so we can start allocating, what are those tiers and that rate structure look like so we can come back and show the math of how we allocated costs and the resulting rates based on that. And so that really what the cost of service does is come back and meets the intent of Prop 218. And that's what we need to make sure that we can prove as we develop our rates for year one. That's our adjustment period. And then the subsequent 4 years, then we're able to adjust based on the percentages that we've come back to with our financial plan. So that's really the key and the focus of what we've done since we chatted last time. So based on that, we identified our customer classes, our rate structures, and our revenue transition plans. For water, and I'm already on slide 6, going for a gold star today.
You're doing well.
We came back and looked at our residential, a non-residential, and our irrigation landscape. That's the potable outdoor irrigation needs that we have. And as Jeff mentioned, we've got a slide in here where he'll brief you on the other side of the table for that component. And we select these classes because they really use the system differently. We know within that group there's differences, but as a whole, for cost allocation, we come back to these. On the rate structure for residential, we're eliminating the water allowance, or that first tier of water in that fixed charge. We're eliminating a variable tier size. We're setting a fixed threshold. They're the current thresholds, but we're setting those as well as part of that. For non-residential, same thing. We're eliminating the allowance. And on the consumption side, we're moving away from the tiers to a uniform rate. So they pay for all water at the same rate regardless of how much. And we do that for several reasons for non-residential and irrigation. One is they're very different in the amount of water they use. So their characteristics and how they use the water are similar. They're a very low peaking customer typically, excluding the irrigation. But they can use a different amount. So establishing those tiers can be challenging. On the sewer side, we're looking at residential and non-residential, and we're maintaining the current rate structure. So staff's taking a look at the multipliers that are being used, so each residential basis, and then for non-residential, how many equivalents are those customers. Those are all being reviewed right now to make sure that those assumptions are still correct. So for water, we talked about, I think 2 meetings ago, we talked about the different transition plans. And so this is the level rate adjustments. This is what we talked about a little bit more last time as well, of smoothing the rate adjustments over the 5-year period. So for water, that wasn't a huge issue. You can see starting in 18-19, it's 1.7 inside that red box. It's about 1.8 for a couple of years and 1.9% adjustment. So that's the overall revenue adjustment that we need to generate on the water side. And again, these reflect all the prior discussions of our cost savings and revenue enhancements that we've been working with you on. So the current water rates, fixed charge that varies by meter size, tiered rate structure with the allowance in this case for the current structure, and then our variable meter sizes. And that's one of the things we noticed as we went back over about the last month as we're looking at the information. There was a significant amount of consumption in that first tier, regardless of what type of customer, whether it was residential, non-residential, irrigation. Depending on the meter size, we had a significant amount of the consumption in that first tier. And so that drives the rate design and the cost allocations as we go forward, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So based on those customer classes and the cost of service analysis, then the bi-monthly rate would actually, for a 5/8 inch meter, would decline slightly to $112.28. We'd still have the variable meter charge for those larger meter sizes, though that would still exist. For the consumption charge, you can see tier 1 would be $1.09 per cubic foot, $1.14 for tier 2, $3.56 for tier 3, and I'm sorry, $1.56. That sounded odd when it came out. And $1.77 for tier 4. Now the difference in those rates, based on the cost of service, is how those customers that use water in those tiers impact the system. So what this is saying is that those in tier 4 have a higher peaking factor on the system. So the difference between their average use and their peak use is significant compared to a tier 1 customer that stays within the first 1,000 cubic feet as an example. And that's just the use pattern where they stay low and then they peak up in the summer and they come back down. And that's what drives those costs. For non-residential, it would be $1.47 for each cubic foot and $1.78 for irrigation. And so you can see that for non-residential, it falls between tier 2 and tier 3 on average, so they don't have that lower cost to stay down low. It's right about in that area. And then for irrigation, it's actually the highest tier. That's typical because what we see on irrigation is they don't do anything, and then they pop on and they're running pretty hot and heavy all summer, and then they come back down typically in the wintertime period. So that reflects those usage characteristics they have on the system. So we've developed rates for the 5-year period, and here we have the full bi-monthly meter charges, the 5/8 through a 4-inch meter. The current rates are the first column from the left with the numbers, and then we have each of the out years. And what you'll see if you compare 2018-19, the second column of numbers, to the present rates is that fixed charges come down just a little bit. And part of the cost of service is having to go back and determine what costs fall in the fixed and consumption side of the table. So we've used our cost of service principles and guidelines to allocate those costs. So that fixed charges come down a little bit, and then you can see the consumption charges, how they would change out over this 5-year period. So what does that mean? On the next page, we have the bill comparison for a typical customer, for a residential customer. This is a 5/8 inch meter. And so I'm going to use my little pointer here if I can get it to work. There we go. So down this first column here, that's the different consumption levels. So using 0 all the way up to 3,000 cubic feet in a billing period. And this next column is the current rate. And so what you can see is up to 1,000, that rate or that bill stays the same. That's that allowance that we have for that 5/8 inch meter. Once you go over 1,000, then that bill starts increasing. The proposed base rate has dropped a little bit, about $1.25, and then the consumption charge, based on what tier they would fall in at each of these different levels, is calculated in that consumptive charge. So you can compare the total bill for 0 use, $112.28, versus the current rate of $113.56. They actually have a decrease in their bill of $1.28. For those low use customers,
Let's,
yep.
I don't know that we want to focus on what it costs for 0 use. I mean, I'd honestly like to see, I mean, a realistic, a minimum consumption and get rid of the, because nobody's gonna wanna say that they, oh great, I got a deduction for not using any water.
Well, I think
Understand.
second home residents
Yeah, there's
that
gonna
are
be a lot
away
of
for
those that
3
are
or 4 or
interested.
5 months, even though it
I
doesn't
think
add
the
up to much.
majority are gonna look at that and it's gonna be something that's gonna, they're not gonna believe that there's a savings because they're not using any water, right?
And the majority of your customers are below the yellow line and above. That's most of your customers. We do have some high users, I'll call them out there, but that is the majority of your customers in each of those billing periods.
My point is, the top line at
Just
zero
gets-
use, I mean, I would rather see it, from 0 to 200, or from, is it 200 and above, or is it 200 and under?
It's 200. It's if they use 200 cubic feet, that's the bill.
And if they use 199, then it's a reduction?
It's slightly less than, it wouldn't be 114.46, it'd be 112 and change. You back out the $1.09 for that one unit that would come out of there.
Is there any way we can
Yeah, so
put in there
why-
from 0 to 199?
Yeah, that would make more sense.
Well, so if they use 199, they would be billed for 199 times through 1.9, I believe, in the billing system. So for each number, we just picked easy round numbers for this slide. So for each level of consumption, the bill would be different. So any number between 0 and 200 would see a range of minus $1.28 to an increase of 90 cents. So that's why I just kind of.
Why don't we just
But
call
let's-
it, why don't we just call it the base rate as opposed to zero consumption?
Yeah, that'd work.
And then I think it'll make more sense down the road.
Even though there are gonna be those vacation users in Ebbets Pass that don't use their cabin for 3 or 4 months in a row,
And it'll be the base rate.
it would be 0, and they might be interested in knowing
Well, it's
that
gonna be
that's
both.
gonna
I
be
think, I
down.
think base describes it better as opposed to zero consumption. I think.
Okay.
zero
A
consumption.
base rate would mean anything less than 200.
0, it means 0 or
Zero.
less. Because if they use
Anything over 1.
10, they would get some charge as part of that.
Because there is a water use fee, so
It's gonna be 1 times 1.09 added to 112.28.
Correct.
Oh.
Yeah, these aren't ranges, these are just to show you what those bill impacts may be, different levels of consumption.
Well, my opinion is it's a better chart if it starts with the base rate as opposed to zero consumption.
Yep, I follow what you're saying.
yeah, I agree with that. Nobody's gonna come in and say, great, I'm paying $112 for not getting any water. Something's wrong with this picture.
Yeah, I say $1.28.
But right now, right now, they could come in and say, I'm paying 113 instead of 112. They're saving $1. But it doesn't matter.
It's just a visual thing.
Yeah.
I understand.
Good.
So those are the range of dollars and percentages for your customers' bill impacts that they'd see under the current cost of service analysis and what those proposed rates would look like in year 1. In the out years, everybody would have the same, go back one more, roughly 2% increase on their bill. There wouldn't be this variation depending on consumption levels. It would be that flat adjustment across the board for all customers. And this is that first year where it's that resetting of the cost of service analysis as part of that. Any other questions on water or on the proposed rates? Okay.
How many gallons, and I should know this, 400 cubic feet is how many gallons?
Times 750?
Correct. 7.5.
Okay.
So 1 CF equals,
One
Seven-
cubic foot.
I always try to give people the visual, and when we start, going around town, and I'd really like to see 750-gallon water tank out front, because I don't think people realize what their $1.50, for the consumption rate charges, because, we've all seen the black poly tanks you know, that are about, I don't know, they gotta be, I have a 500-gallon one at the tank that is about that big around and taller than me, 750 gallons is bigger than that. You know, it basically is the footprint of those two doors, you know, as a sphere is about 750 gallons. It's a lot of water.
Yes.
And you're right, the visualization would, you know, really bring it out,
Yeah.
would really make it.
Well, I mean, it even goes further if you think about, okay, now it's not just water there, it's actually delivered. It's delivered to your home, you know. It is, there's a lot of unknowns in how it gets delivered, and that's, you know, that's our job to tell them what it takes, the power costs and that sort of thing. But I think the visual is a good one.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the low-income folks being able to really see that if you use less water, then the increase in rates will be less.
There's always one. Always one, sorry.
Yeah, and going back to the
That's not
visual,
bad.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that a 2.7% increase or so on their bill isn't as bad as the 8.5s and more, yeah.
On the water side's not that tough, it's the sewer side,
Yeah.
that's where you're gonna get.
And to follow up on your comment, Director Strange, one of the things we've heard over the years, especially during the drought, is I don't get any credit on saving water.
Yeah.
And this way, they are able to manage not only their usage, but obviously their bill as well.
So the next step, based on the proposed rates, because I needed to come to some determination of those numbers before we can get into the drought rates so that we can develop that, is to start talking about the drought rate. And so, if you remember, you had the emergency drought declaration in 2014 to 2017. The state mandated that you drop your consumption by 16%. That's from 2013 levels. That was the benchmark that they used, that you reduce it from 2013 by 16%. So that has an impact on your revenues, significant impact on your revenues over those 3 or 4 years that you've been dealing with that. And so what we do with drought rates is we attempt to establish a rate that would keep your revenues the same regardless of what consumption, how much consumption declines. And so what we try and do is tie it to some level or stages or impacts that we can easily identify. And you've got some good ones in your 2015 urban water management plan. You have stage 1, which is an advisory stage. It's a voluntary, and that's pretty common for folks. That's 10% or less consumption savings. Then you have your alert stage. It's 11 to 15%. The moderate, 16 to 25, critical, 26 to 49, and emergency, over 50%. So those are good, identifiable stages that we can start thinking about a drought rate from. So what we do is we take, based on the proposed rates, those final cost of service rates, we reduce our consumption by 10, 15, 25, 50, and over 50, and determine what that revenue loss is. And so what that looks like is under a 10% reduction, then we would reduce overall water sales by 135,000 cubic feet. Oh, this one is, okay, sorry, we were changing our labels on those, so I apologize. 100 cubic feet. That would reduce revenues by $181,000. And so you can see down this list as we go down to the midpoint of each of those stages that we reduce revenues by $235,000 in stage 2, $378 stage 3, $677 in stage 4, and $883,000 in stage 5. And so that's that overall reduction in revenue. And so what a drought rate would do is we would say, okay, if we reduce our revenues by $883,000 under the emergency stage, what would that rate need to be to make sure that we stay at our target level? And so we simply divide the $883,000 by the remaining consumption, and that gives us a rate that can be calculated. Now, that's not the only way. That's just basing it on the consumption. Some folks have based it on a fixed component and a consumption component. So that's something that we'll be back chatting with you about on what your preference would be for that overall approach in developing that. And ultimately, it would be up to the board to implement those drought rates. So staff would come to you and say either A, the state has mandated that we cut back 16%, or we've been in a drought and our consumption is down 15%. We would like to enact stage 1, 2, or 3 under that scenario.
So the reason we're doing this now is that we want this to see the light of Prop 218.
Yes.
And then, I mean, depending, because you never know what the state's gonna do, but so then depending on what restrictions the state imposes on us, as long as it falls within the basic guidelines, or does it have to be pretty strict?
It's what you want to try and do, and what most folks have done over the years that we've been working with people on drought rates, is if it's a 20%, as an example, I would say that staff would probably come to you and say, we would like to implement stage 3 drought rates. Now, what some folks have done is actually gone to stage 2 to see what that revenue change is going to be as well.
I think both sides of us, Amarillo and Tuolumne, have enacted a drought surcharge. Did they have to do a Prop 218 just for that drought surcharge?
They should have, yes.
I don't remember that part of it.
Well, there were some folks that did some emergency declarations through penalties that they implemented these types of fees through. But technically, what we need to do to make sure that we're abiding by Prop 218 is have these rates posted. They'll adjust each year just like our other rates do for that 5-year period. So because we know as we're adjusting rates, our revenues go up, and if we lose consumption, we lose more revenue, so we need to account for that.
But it'll still be up to the board at that
Yes.
time to decide whether or
Yep.
not, because they could also, you know, try to make cuts of some sort.
Correct.
So,
Yep.
so we have the ability to go at least at that level.
Yes.
And just for a better understanding, this is something that we're running these rate adjustments, these potential rate changes that we may implement in the future, if and only if the state mandates conservation, and then we will already have done the 218 process reach out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the only other time that folks have enacted these types of rates is if you had a major supply go down. You lost a line and you needed people to conserve. I've had utilities actually implement a drought rate or a surcharge or some sort of fee like this because they couldn't sell as much water as they're supposed to. So it would be staff would come to the board, here's what we recommend, you all give the marching orders, and then they'd be back to you at some point to say, okay, we can reduce this to stage 2, or the state came out with more, we need to go to stage 4, whatever that would be, and then the board would essentially turn it on and turn it off at those different levels as part of that.
But as Scott says, because we would be discussing it now under 218, we wouldn't have to go back and have new 218.
Correct. That is correct.
And that makes sense. That's, you know.
Yeah, this is a tool in your toolbox, essentially.
Yeah.
That, and that's what happened. Now, I'll give you a bad experience. I won't tell you where. It was close by, relatively. We implemented it in the middle of the drought. And that was a hard discussion because we were increasing rates fairly significantly. So rates were already going up. And then we added a drought rate on top of that because they were in stage 2 based on their urban water management plan. So that added another component to that rate. Having these in your back pocket, if you need them, when staff comes and says, our revenues are down because of the state mandates or whatever it may be, allows you to implement them legally under Prop 218 and saves your revenue where you're not increasing rates just because of that. You have that ability in place already.
So in addition to the state mandated conservation, it's, as you just said, it could also be for whatever other reason why our rates are low, or maybe why our revenues are low.
Consumption.
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 Yeah.
Consumption's low, okay.
Yeah. So if you had some issues with your source and you couldn't provide that, then that could be a reason that the board could implement these rates as part of that. And the way it works, These are not your numbers, just so you know. This is just a simple example. If we had a customer that used 6 units of water, their current bill would be $58.16. If you ask them to save 20%, so they reduce from 6 units down to 5, their bill would increase slightly to $59.67. So that's that maintain the current revenue level by the rates go up a little bit, but we hit that same target. If they don't conserve, they still use 6, then their bill goes up to $68.33. And so we hope that that provides some incentive that they don't use that much water the next time around as part of that. So that's how it tries to work, and that's why these levels are important, that we have these trigger points, we have these ranges of what our target conservation or consumption decreases are, so that we can tie that rate to those changes as part of that. Now, the other thing we'll think about as we go through this is, are there additional costs that the district incurs because of a drought? And one thing we noticed over the last 3 or 4 years is public outreach had gone up significantly in some utilities during this drought because they were sending out so much information. That's an added cost over and above what we've got in our rate transition plans right now. So we can include that. On the other side, if our costs go down, we're not pumping as much or we're not treating as much, we can reduce the cost too, to show that we're not doing that. So there's different pieces of this that we'll work through as Jeff and myself and others go through this and fine tune what those numbers look like as part of this. But that's really the big picture, is trying to maintain a stable revenue even in times when consumption is mandated to be decreased by the state or other issues affecting the district.
Yeah, I just want to comment, over the years, I've always taken pride in the fact that we never had to do a drought surcharge, but the reality is, in hindsight, it left the district with significant shortfalls, and in hindsight, it's probably something that we should have considered, and I'm glad that we're doing this now, because I'd like to have something, when the governor comes and because I actually think they're going to do, whether there's a drought or not, they're going to reduce consumption, just like they did with the power grid. They said, we're not going to fix the power grid, we just want you to use different light bulbs. That's what they're going to do to everybody's home, in the shower and such. And so, the consumption is going to continue to decrease. Lawns are going to be illegal, and things of that nature are going to happen, drought or not. So I think it's important that at least the public understands, that the consumption is, we have to make an estimate of consumption, and then that's how we do our budget. And if that consumption is altered by someone else, by the state or whoever, or a natural disaster or whatever could occur, our costs are basically fixed. Mm-hmm. And there's really nothing we can do about it. And we shouldn't be falling into a shortfall and then not being able to do repairs and things of that nature, or keep adequate staff. So I think it's important that we have this as a tool when the inevitable comes.
If there's waterless car washes, maybe there'll be waterless showers.
I was going to make a West Point joke, but
Best you don't.
At every point, we are well aware of what the state is mandating or what they're thinking. We won't know the final decision, of course, until they make it, but we have good feelers out there, and I know, Joel is up there and Dave, so that we can feel safe in doing, proposing our rates as is.
Yes, yeah, and the current rate plan is based on the most recent year, back up about 3 or 4 months of consumption data. So it's out of the drought, but people were still using a little bit less water. Came up a little bit as part of that. So I think we've been conservative on that side. And then if something does happen where the state comes out and, before last week, there wasn't a lot of snow on the mountains. And so you know, this is gonna allow you to say, you know, when the state does say, okay, here's what we're doing, you have the ability and the option as a board to implement this to make sure that you sustain the district's revenues over, you know, the time period we're looking at.
But I understand we're going to have a storm that's going to make up for the last 6 months that we haven't had water.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Sean, you used, a moment ago, you used the example of when somebody went from 6 units of consumption down to 5. Going back to what Jeff was talking about before, about, you know, the odd situation where there's zero consumption. If there continues to be zero consumption, even though, you know, there's this mandated reduction, how would that person's bill be affected?
So if they had no consumption, their bill wouldn't change if it's all on the consumption side of it. So, and that's what this example is. If you wanted to implement a drought rate on the fixed side, you can do that. It gets a little bit complicated to make sure that we're being proportional to everybody. So we have to think about how we would do that. But under that situation, you know, let's say we added $1 to each account in stage 1, then their rate would go up again. That is one of the concerns that we hear from some folks, is that I'm using less and I'm paying more or the same. My unit cost just went up as part of that. And that's true, but as Director Davidson said, the costs are also fixed. You know, your costs don't decline just because people use less. And so that's why I think it's important to look at both sides of it, where we started from, and then what piece of the rate do we add the drought rate to?
Okay, looking forward in this, do you address that?
No, I have not addressed that part yet.
Okay.
And that's something that we're gonna work on. And go ahead.
Actually, one of the goals that we were hoping to get coming out of this presentation is some feel for the board's direction on, do you want to put the costs onto the consumptive side or split it onto both fixed, or the base rate, and the consumptive side? So that's one of the directions we were hoping to get today.
Which cost are we talking about?
The drought rate.
The drought.
Well, if you took a pie and you put all our costs in the pie graph, there would be a very, very faint line that is going to be water cost. I mean, if you really want to figure out what our cost for the actual water is, you know, it's basically licensing and things of that nature, very, very small amount, you know, but there's a really big one, retirement, healthcare. Those are all the things that it doesn't matter if you know, I mean, those are all fixed costs.
0 gallons, they're still there.
But it's hard for people to understand. They think that water is, you know, like gasoline is a you know, it's how much you use. You know, it's the bureaucracy that costs everything.
But in a drought, or in a mandated conservation situation, all that you're losing the revenues that you're losing are all on the consumptive side.
Correct.
So it wouldn't make any sense to go to the fixed cost and add to those in that situation, because everything is consumption that you'd be losing, and you could make it up in that small part of that pie. That's the only.
I'll have to.
So we're not making a decision on this today. We're just discussing it. Okay.
Well,
And
you know,
absorbing-
and I'd like to
absorbing it
hear
is-
why there was a thought about dividing it between the two.
It's an option that most folks will only base it on a consumption component, but there are utilities that do include a fixed component as part of that.
See, that
I'll be honest, it's easier if it's just on the consumption.
Oh,
It makes
yeah,
more
it seems like it
sense.
would.
Absolutely.
It would be easier to
Yeah.
fix. It'd be easier to understand too, and it wouldn't seem
Correct.
like it was fair if now you add to the fixed. Our fixed costs aren't going up because of consumption. I mean, because of conservation.
Right, and it's the consumptive issue that brought about the requirement or the availability of water as it affects your consumption that brought about the need for us to do the surcharge in the beginning. It's not because the government, or, you know, the state comes out and says, oh, you need to, you know, increase your wastewater treatment sizes this much so that you have, you know, more electrical ability or something, you know. It's all about consumption. It's a drought issue, and so in my mind, it should be directly related to the consumptive end of things.
Well, I was hesitant to even bring it up, because it probably, pick a number, it's 0.5% of your rate payers that have zero consumption.
Correct.
So it probably doesn't make any sense to even.
The only issue I think that certainly would want to find out what our billing capability is, because if you don't have consumption one month, but you do have consumption the next month, is it going to automatically pick that up?
We bill on a bi-monthly basis.
No, I understand.
I understand. The only area where we have some difficulty in getting consistent reads is up in Nebbits
No, that's not
Pass.
what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, can you change the bill if we get into a drought scenario? Can you, if somebody doesn't use their place for 2 months and then comes back and uses their place for 2 months, is our payroll, or not our payroll, but our accounting going to pick that up and be able to add the drought surcharge? Are they going to be able to go from nothing to something?
Yeah, we can flip the switch at any time. And what we generally, if we get a drought surcharge, it'll flip on everybody as of the same day. However, you're correct the way
Based on whether or not they have consumption?
Yes. There are two other points I'd like to bring out regarding drought. One is the discussion of how your board actually, the mechanism for approving the surcharge. If there's any particular restrictions you want to place upon it, whether it's majority, 4/5 vote, how that works. The other component is, I think several of you have alluded to the fact that the state is looking to force reduced consumption by all water districts through maybe the water-based budgeting process and such. We are keeping track of what's going on down in Sacramento, and if that does come into effect, it's very likely that will not affect us during this 5-year rate plan. They'll give us time to work towards that goal. So if we're looking at within this 5-year time frame, it truly is either a drought declaration or a supply issue. When we get going forward into if the state mandates reduced consumption, just like they talked about 20 by 2020 and gallons per day per capita going down, that will be addressed during the next rate plan as we have more information.
So my comment to your first statement is that I would recommend that we do it similar to what we do now. It's majority decision on implementing that surcharge rather than a 4/5 majority or something like that. And I don't know if the rest of you guys have an opinion or.
Yeah, I don't see a reason to do the 4/5 thing. I mean, I don't see, I agree with Terry.
The reason I ask that is as we come through with the Prop 218 noticing and the rate hearing, we want to have very specific guidelines on when the drought surcharges can be implemented, so it's very clear and you vote on it at that time. I just wanted to have a little advance input, so when we write these, you understand them and the public understands them as well, and they're included in the noticing process.
Well, I think we've kind of clarified one thing, that it doesn't have to be the state mandating conservation. That can't be the only reason. It's for that, and as well as other reasons that the revenues have been reduced due to consumption or supply.
Certainly.
Or which kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
We don't want to tie ourselves in a knot where we can't use this when we need it.
Understood.
And that's why your plan has these nice categories that work well with what we're trying to look at for this. So I'm thinking I heard consumption would be that all in
Right,
consumption
right.
from that. Okay, perfect.
Except for that one customer.
So I'll let Jeff talk about ag rates.
For those of you who've been on the board for quite some time, you probably look at that top number, $9.70 per acre foot, and say, that's been that way ever since I've been here. And in reality, it's been there probably since the early 80s or possibly even the late 70s. We have had several opportunities. Most recently, I believe it was in 2010, Peter? 2009, when Larry Diamond was here, we did a Prop 218 on agricultural rates. There's only 8 to 11 different property owners, and one property owner had a number of votes because of the different parcels he controlled, and there was a majority protest, and we did not implement those rate increases. Peter has gone through the process now of outreach with the local farmers, explaining our additional costs, especially related to New Hogan, with the increase in the budget for the Army Corps of Engineers' recent work to improve flood control in the dam at New Hogan that raised our costs $155,000 a year. When you factor in those costs and our other costs that we're still paying for the debt service on the reservoir, it's split between us and Stockton East. It's very apparent that $9.70 per acre foot does not cover our costs. And there was some outreach. Peter met with them on February 20th. There's a general consensus that they understand rates will have to go up, and Peter has proposed increasing those rates from 12 or up to $18 per acre foot. That is still less than Stockton East's current rate of $23 per acre foot, although it's not apples to apples because they provide more resources and more amenities, but they themselves are also looking to increase their rates, especially to cover the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So these rates are very defensible. They don't, even if we look at what our actual raw water costs are coming out of Hogan, it's about $143 per acre foot. And that's spread amongst everybody, whether it's residential for consumptive or raw. So we're well within the guidelines to be cost-based, and we're looking at increasing the costs over the first 3 years and having level for years 4 and 5, going from 12 to 15 to 18 and stay at $18 per acre foot. Now, there are some riparian users who get a discount because of the riparian. It's a 45% discount. All in all, I think as we include this in the Prop 218, yes, it will be approved without a majority protest from all the other ratepayers.
Have we had any movement in agriculture at all?
I believe Peter says there's one additional landowner is interested in getting connections in 2019 and possibly another after that.
Yeah, so I did have one landowner that's coming on in 2019. It's not quite a bit. It's maybe just maybe a couple hundred acre feet of water per year, but yeah, and they're actually planting cherries, it sounds like, but that should come on pretty shortly. And then also I have some new landowners of I guess it was formerly the Ann Ranch, that are looking to expand to other parcels outside of where they're currently operating. So there could be some expansion there as well. So
And little by little.
And also, just to put this in perspective, currently we get about $7,000 per year for ag revenue. And this increase will move it up into maybe $14,000 a year. It's not significant, but I think it's a fair price.
Yeah, I see that about $3,400 increase, so that'd be 12 or
Yeah.
whatever, and it'll go up, obviously. But the first year, 18-19, it only increases at like $3,200.
Exactly.
And it seems like a good time to do it, wrap it all in with the 218, so the group is much larger.
It won't be, though. Don't they have to be separate?
Pardon me?
They're separate 218s, aren't they?
I believe, go ahead, John.
No,
Well, if they're not separate, then I think it should go up.
They are.
It's a different a different class, so that,
That, yes.
how would that work? Can commercial do the same thing? If there's so the ag, we have residential, commercial, and ag.
I think
How
it's the
how
fact
can we
that it comes out of the treatment plant, and the treatment plant costs are all connected, and this just is raw water, so it's not,
Okay.
doesn't have that component, so it has to be,
Right.
I mean,
We'll look at that, but
I'm a general contractor, I don't know exactly what the deal is, but I'm just assuming.
Yeah, we have three different classes. I thought that was the reason why we were doing this now, and I was wondering why the outreach, if they're going to be combined, if the 218 would be combined with all other customers. Huh, we should
Your
look at
letter's
that.
going to be very long.
Yes. We have started the preparation of that letter already, and yes. It's gone from a 2-page letter to a little bit longer than that, because especially
Well,
talking...
I certainly go along with this, and I've talked to a couple of those guys, and I've heard that there's some movement, so that's a positive thing. I mean, we're, unless we get some grant for distribution, we're never gonna have a lot of, if the walnut industry takes off again, those won't be the only opportunities, but, as long as we're in the ballpark of what Stockton East is doing, I think that's where we should be.
Certainly. Thank you.
And if we spend much more time on it, we're gonna blow the whole $3,400.
So that was water. On the sewer side of things, we've got our level rate adjustment plan here. So starting in 1819, it's an overall revenue change of 4.1%. Again, we go through the cost of service analysis. We allocate those costs, and on this slide, we have our one-year catch-up plan. And I'm gonna come back to that in a minute. I'm gonna go to the level rate. That's our smooth 4% adjustment. You can see that the overall rate goes up about $7 in 1819 for residential, and about $7 to $8 each year after that. That's that smooth transition over time. We've incurred the additional borrowing from water to pay that, and so that's what allows us to do the smooth transition. And then you can see non-residential didn't go up quite as much that first year. That again is the cost of service, and then it starts going up based on that going forward. So as we look at this, we have the level plan, which is the residential. In the 5th year, we end at $210.63. Yeah.
Sean, back to the slide before that.
Yep.
The transfers in, is that the borrowing you talked?
No, that is actually coming from the replacement. Well, it's a mix of the borrowing and the replacement funding. It's two different things in that line summed together just to make it fit on the page nicely.
Okay. So it's the CIP program and borrowing from the water fund?
Yes.
Okay, and it's going to be with the way that these rates are designed to the 4.1 each year, we will quit doing both of those in 2022-23? How come the CIP moves away?
No, at the end of that 5 years, you want to look at it again, but essentially that rate, when we get to year 5, it funds the projection of O&M and capital in this 5-year window, and it's paying for that additional debt we've incurred to borrow from the water fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah, great.
We haven't paid it all off, but we're at a level where we can continue to pay that amount back to water, because I just went blank. I forget how many years we looked at.
We were looking at a 10-year window.
Thank you. 10 years of borrowing, so we're at a level to fund that for the first 5 years and out.
Okay.
So the difference, we wanted to show you the 1 year and the even adjustment again, just to remind you where we were. On the 1 year catch-up plan, we're slightly lower, $206 for residential versus $210 for the even adjustment. And again, that's that catch-up. We don't have as much borrowing. We're getting rates where they need to be. We don't have to bump them up over time to get back to where we want to be at the end of that. So we just wanted to make sure that the board was still liking the level rate plan based on that.
And President Ratterman, at the last meeting, the board directed, after reviewing the options, 1-year catch-up, 2-year catch-up, or level, the board directed us to go ahead and create a plan for level rate plan, level increases. And part of this, in the 1-year catch-up, was I asked to have it included for your benefit and for Director Strange, so you can see, especially in that first year, the significant increase in rates if you do go with the 1-year catch-up, whereas the level, it smooths things out.
Understood. Thank you.
So where we are at is to get any further direction from the board today on the overall revenue adjustment, our level rate adjustment plan, the rate structure, drought rates, which I think we got, and ag rates. And based on that, then we're gonna come back, finalize the study, document, written report essentially, but make sure that we've got all our I's dotted, our T's crossed as we go through and develop the rates. So we can do that as part of that, and then we would begin the Proposition 218 process, where we'd be back in front of the board asking you to set that public hearing no sooner than 45 days than they've reasonably received the notice, and then we would send out that notice and have some public outreach efforts as part of that prior to that hearing, where if no major protest occurred, the board could adopt the rates for that 5-year plan. So I don't know if there's any further thoughts, comments, or direction on where we're at this point in time, or if we should keep plowing forward.
As far as I'm concerned, keep on going.
Plow. Good.
So,
Yeah.
I would like to know how much customers' bill will be the first year with the increase in the water and the sewer?
Oh, a combined bill. So, I'm gonna flip back and forth here real quick, so don't watch the screens too closely. So we have it's about a $7 increase in each bill,
So that's
$7 to $8 each year,
So
yeah,
that's $14.
bi-monthly for each year.
Well, I don't have sewer up in
We could
Camp Connell.
we could fix
Yeah,
that.
we fix that. But I know, you will in Cabral,
Well, some folks do. I don't.
and Jeff, of course.
I trust my-
and
Yeah, we might want to get this whole public process done in time for any potential candidate that wants to run for our offices, give them time to file. Might be interesting.
All right, Sean, we're interested in the next steps. Looking forward. Thank you very, very much. Anything
Actually,
further?
just for clarification, the board is comfortable with the level rate plans for both the water and the sewer,
Yes.
correct?
Y- Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
How do you define comfortable?
The dir-
With the
That's
alternatives,
the preferred model, I should say.
with the alternatives, that would be the most comfortable. The
And
least-
so we are
the
gonna
least-
mo-
Or maybe it'd be the least uncomfortable.
Okay. So what we're going to do, as Sean mentioned, they're going to go back and refine the models based on a level rate plan for both water and sewer. Bring that back to your board. We're going to have further discussion and clarification of what the drought rates will look at, along with the initial requirements for your board to implement them, the rules and requirements for that. And we're going to come back with some more information on the ag rates as to whether or not we actually can wrap them up. And I was thinking, I'm going to look at EID in Georgetown because they provide agricultural water, and I'll look at what they did recently with their rate increases. We're going to come back. We have 2 more board meetings that I would like to be able to wrap this process up and have Finance Committee and then probably an ad hoc committee meeting in between. So my original goal was to have your board approve the proposed rates and set the meeting at the March 14th board meeting, but I don't think we're going to be there yet. We still have some more direction and more numbers to present to you. So we're going to be looking at March 28th for your board to approve the proposed rates, set the Prop 218 hearing, which is tentative, which will be tentatively May 23rd, because that gives us about 50 days for that notification process. And we will be then mailing out the 218 notices and provide public outreach to all the districts. Joel and Dave will be working through that process to go out and educate the board, the ratepayers about the process and get input on that.
And you said May 23rd?
Look, tentatively May 23rd at this point. May is going to be a difficult month for board meetings because Aqua's in that second Wednesday timeframe.
Right, right.
So we were originally looking at the 16th if we had your board approve these on the March 14th, but we're going to move it back a week. But that'll still give me enough time to prepare the budget and bring the full budget back to your board in June for review and adoption.
Now, when you talk about putting that letter together or putting the story out, do you think it would be very necessary to have this drought measure, or drought, whatever it is, drought usage fee right in the middle of our rate increase? Could you have it?
We don't want to do two 218s.
Well, no, I meant in the letter,
Right.
the letter that's going to go out. No, I understand that we want to do it all, but I'm saying the emphasis, would we really have to have the drought fee in the middle?
Depending upon how we're going to message this, because a 218 notice has to meet certain requirements. So we will, my thought process is to go through the water and sewer rates, identify the needs, why we're doing it, what the rate structure is going to look like, and identify those. And then we can talk about the drought surcharge separately from that.
Well, that's all I meant.
Yes,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
the ag, so yes, they'll all have separate sections, but they all have to be included in this notification.
And can we look into that, whether or not ag is a separate, it's obviously, it's,
We did a memo on it a few years ago, I'll pull it out and send it to Jeff.
okay,
Yes.
it's already, you're positive on that, that's,
I'm pretty sure, I'll go back and look at it and see if anything's changed since then.
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
So it'd sure be nice, wrap everybody into customers. Just
Well-
all customers in the same class, or all your rates are being discussed here, and this is your time to protest. This is the amount of customers we had, and you need 50% plus one of any of the entire group of customers, regardless of what type of service we provide to them. That'd be nice.
They'll still be part of the 218 process. It'll just depend on who gets to vote on those, on ag rates. If
Right.
everybody's votes counted, or just the property owners in that
Right.
group gets to vote. But they'll still be all included in that process.
Okay.
Jeff, I would also be agreeable to moving, you mentioned about the second week in May, Aqua, maybe moving our board meeting to possibly the first week of that month to avoid the Aqua, but still get, stay on task to get this done. I don't know about the rest of the board members, but I'd like to keep that open as an option.
Or the third week.
Well, we do,
Yeah.
with the Prop 218 notice, remember, they have at least 45 days.
Right.
And so what you do is, it's not the day that you approve the proposed rates and set the hearing, it's the date we actually mail out the notifications. So there's always going to be a lag between those two dates. But we will try to stay on, I plan on staying on track as close as possible, because we do have a number of issues that, as most likely, it's, looking at the budget is all dependent upon where we stand on the rates. So that's going to be critical to understand as early as possible to get this thing finished up.
Cool.
But I will talk to Dave and bring that up and let him know about your thoughts regarding early May meetings.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. And thank you for pushing that along like you did. It's gold star worthy. Old business 5B, update on actions of the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency, or SIGMA, and JPA Peter Martin. Are you going to be presenting on this too?
Fellow board members, I'll need to leave here just before 3 o'clock, so just giving you a heads up.
I'm hoping we're not sitting here at 3.
This bad's one.
Thank you, President Ratterman, board members. So this is just kind of, I guess this is the first of many updates that we've agreed to kind of create as a standing item, just so you kind of can keep up to date with what's going on with the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority. I guess also Russ, I don't know how you want to.
Is this new?
Yeah, so this is a, do you want me just to kind of go through kind of just a real summary, and if you want to add to that based upon?
That would suit me, yeah, thank you.
Okay. So just real briefly, in the past, with regards to our groundwater sustainability agency, they restated an amended MOU to allow the county to join. The groundwater sustainability agency was circulated to this board, which was approved last month. The county of Stanislaus took action of their board, and we're still currently waiting on Rock Creek Water District to do the same. I don't think that they meet regularly. That becomes kind of an issue. So, but we're trying to work through that too. And once that's finalized, the MOU will be finalized as well, and the county of Calaveras will be added into that groundwater sustainability agency. So the February 14th meeting was very busy. They approved the cost share for all the 17 GSAs. There was quite a bit of discussion, but it went through as was proposed to this board some time ago. And they agreed to enter into that funding agreement with the Department of Water Resources for the $1.5 million grant, which included that cost share proposal as part of that. Also entered in the consultant agreement with Woodard and Curran to take on the groundwater sustainability planning process, and also other necessary budgetary approvals associated with the agreement on the cost share and the new consultant as well. So we received a presentation from Woodard and Curran on the process, which I included the printouts today within my presentation. Just a few of those slides just to kind of orient you with what to expect over the next, I guess, 20 months as we're looking at now. So basically, you can see that the goal is to get a groundwater sustainability plan in place and approved by all 17 groundwater sustainability agencies by January of 2020. That's going to take a lot of technical work up to that point. As you can see, there's sort of a lot of moving parts with this. This is quite an ordeal. They've got a huge consultant team working on this. And mostly it's going to be starting to develop the water balance in the beginning, and then ultimately come up with the objectives that will go into that plan, and starting to set those minimum thresholds for what is considered sustainability. And then there's also going to be some enhancement of monitoring networks, and that'll include some of the design and monitoring wells. So they'll be taking a look at some of the places in Calaveras County where maybe data is missing as a result of the outcomes from that modeling effort. And then they'll start to define some projects and actions. That's where things get kind of interesting from a policy perspective, and including economic analyses and things like that. That'll start to really push forward with the plan itself. And then ultimately that'll work towards the groundwater sustainability plan document. So all these things are sort of dovetailing into a larger document that will be presented to you within 2 years. Outreach is a big part of it. They're looking to use kind of a process that's called the champion process, where you access people locally that have kind of a lot of engagement in the community. That way you're not just hosting meetings, just host meetings and start to get some good outreach on a local level. So that will happen here in this county. And basically they're looking at the JPA members themselves to go out and work within their groundwater sustainability agencies to start to do that stakeholder outreach. But the consultant will be doing quite a bit of work on the ground. 25% of the budget is set aside just for outreach itself. So, and there's varying levels of stakeholders, and members of the public are a part of that process as well. So yeah, there's an information flow diagram, and this is here, and just essentially they're saying that they want to create a technical group that will provide a back and forth sort of flow of information from the groundwater sustainability agencies. Those will be the technical experts, and they will help to inform the decisions of the JPA itself. And then that will have some feedback as well from stakeholders and the public as well. It's going to be very interesting. just continue to keep things moving towards that final goal of getting that plan in place. So this project roadmap is actually about 5 or 6 of these in place, but this is kind of a key element of this document, and it will be informing those that are sitting on the JPA of the key decisions on a meeting-by-meeting basis. So as you can see, I'd say it looks kind of like chutes and ladders, but essentially there's decisions that are made at these key points, and they're going to drive this process as it goes to completion. And there's kind of these drop-dead deadlines, I suppose, to where decisions have to be made and progress has to continue going forward.
I think Woodard Kernan has a lot of time to spend on PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, graphics are a big part of that work, I guess, yeah. But, you know, this is, actually, I like this, this presentation. It really informs the public, and this may be something that we can kind of hand out to some people who may be interested locally at some point, just to see how this process is going on. So kind of the near-term actions are starting to assemble that technical advisory committee and sort of also the outreach committees. And they're going to start meeting monthly. I had asked to be a part of that, so likely I'll be assigned to that group, the technical advisory committee. And they'll start to meet with each of the individual groundwater sustainability agencies. I think they've actually already asked to start to meet next month. And they want to get ideas of what each groundwater sustainability agency feels is the most important key issues for managing their portion of the basin. And then I think there's one of the big things that's been talked about a lot lately is that there's not a lot of information out there that is in one place. So they're going to start to beef up the web page for the JPA, where kind of a one-stop shop that'll inform people. And then they're going to prepare an outreach plan, which we'll probably be able to keep you informed on that. And then they're going to revise and distribute that roadmap I just showed in that slide, that prior slide, and then begin work on that groundwater sustainability plan development. So,
When do you think the local outreach is going to start?
I'd
This year?
say within the next couple of months.
Oh.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And so I don't know what that looks like, whether or not they start having workshops, things like that. But,
And will you be the main presenter on that, or do you anticipate doing that as well?
well, I was hoping to tap into Joel to sort of, start to team up on some of that stuff. He has some familiarity with the consultant from Crocker and Crocker that will be doing quite a bit of that work, but I think they're going to look to the local folks to start to really, shape that as well. So.
Okay.
Excuse me, I asked, or I pointed out this thing that came out in the Aqua newsletter about learn how your district or GSA can better identify. We're way past this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Congratulations.
No, I think actually that
Are you presenting at this workshop?
no, not at all. I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just the facilitator to get this thing to the finish line. So there are plenty of people that know a lot more about groundwater than I do. So, but yeah, if you have any questions, or at this point, if you have anything you wanted to add.
Well, I just want to make sure that we are in agreement that the outreach will be limited to the geographic area that is the footprint of our groundwater basin. We're not going to be making outreach on groundwater issues to Bertha's area. I mean, it's just over by where Jeff lives, so
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. Yeah.
it's not a county-wide involvement, although anybody who's interested in the issues would be welcome to
Certainly
attend.
can attend, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I did get an inquiry from a young woman asking for a date that we could get together to talk about what the way she put it was our concerns. What are, and I had interpreted that as kind of our objectives for being, what we'd like to get out of it for our input. And the gentleman who is the alternate representative, very bright guy named Walter Ward, kind of backed me down a little bit and said, this isn't the time for that. This is just a kind of meet and greet. But I was reading more into that. I said to me that the concerns would be synonymous with what are our objectives. And he says, oh no, the objectives come later, so I don't know. So we'll have to arm wrestle over that.
It's just terminology.
But, I don't know, I touched on this at our last meeting, because I always have to go to that meeting in the morning and then race back here for our meeting in the afternoon. And I can see that this is gonna be it's gonna be at times a painful process, because you don't wanna cut people off, but there were some, one of those small districts, an important district in the Delta, just pirated the whole, or hijacked the whole meeting, or an hour of it, talking about something that they shouldn't have been really talking about. So, anyway, I hope the chairman will get a heavier gavel and say, you know, let's move on. Because it is a very short timeline, but I'm still continue to be very optimistic about the opportunities that are embedded in this for our county and for the future of our availability to our ability to have water available for our future citizens. It's going to be an important component of that, I'm certain. So, are there any questions?
Nope. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
And if nothing further, no further discussion here, any public comment on that item? Sigma? Okay, seeing none. General Manager report?
I have nothing.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Board reports, information, future agenda items. Terry?
Korea was interesting, the whole Olympics and all. And the reason, though, that I bring that up is because they have spent billions of dollars in infrastructure to develop these 3 sites that they hosted different Olympic activities at. Most of those features are going to be removed right after, very soon. They're already planning the deconstruction of those sites, because they ran the numbers and said it will be so expensive to maintain those facilities, it's easier for us to just demolish them. So the billions of dollars that were spent to build them will now have a portion of that being spent in addition to destroy them. Yeah, imagine doing that with our water and wastewater systems. But anyway, so I thought that that was a real interesting perspective. And then the other thing on future agenda items, I'd like to get John Mills in here at some point in time and have him give a presentation on what he's been doing for the district. You know, we spend money in that direction, and either that or some sort of written update on what he's been doing, if anything, for the district. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, with that said, Jeff, can you get that comment to Mr. Egerton?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
John,
Jeff.
John is doing literally half as much this year as he was last year. I mean, financially, his obligation has been cut in half.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, Bertha?
Snow up the hill, that's great. Other than that, I don't have.
Okay, Russ?
Ralph Aldridge was here earlier, and he pointed out that Miss Moreland is with us here. She's the new reporter for the Enterprise. I want to acknowledge your presence here. Good luck to you.
You're already in trouble? It's usually the only reason they send people here.
Well, welcome.
Joel, this, do you have anything that you'd like to touch on about the double billings and stuff that people are complaining about down in Copperopolis on social media? And has that been addressed?
It has been.
Okay.
Why don't we follow up after?
Yeah, this, let's keep on topic on the agenda items.
All right.
And you could probably take that conversation off.
All right. I will.
Okay.
That's all I have to talk about.
Okay, we did have a camera meeting last week, and with a full agenda of items. A lot of things we touched on here, and Joel presented it at that meeting also on a few of these assembly bills that are moving forward. We also had a meeting, as the alternate, I attended the UMRA meeting at Pardee last Friday, and the UMRA board did agree to a motion regarding Wild and Scenic, more or less approve the process, the process of the AB 142
Stipulations.
study and the stipulations that were going forward. The study, we were kind of weigh it, if we're gonna approve the study, are we approving the process of the study being done? Because the study itself isn't finished, and it won't be complete until next week. I think the final product will be done and out on March 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
It's the comment deadline, it'll be end of March before we see the final report, most likely.
Okay, so it's the final, okay, so we won't see it, but that was just a quick update on what happened at UMRA. That's all I have to report.
I have a question regarding that. How did the public meeting go in regards to the Wild and Scenic? I missed that, I already left.
The Moke Hill one?
The Moke Hill.
There were songs.
What's that?
There were songs.
There were songs.
You've just been forwarded a copy, a full video of it on your email. You can actually attend it at home.
I just
Enjoy.
wanted to get the opinion, or at least a statement
But I
from
don't think
those
this,
that attended.
this item, but on our agenda here, I don't think we're gonna have time to discuss. I wasn't there, no one else reported on it. I was in
Okay,
Kansas City
excuse
that
me,
week.
I did go, and I felt that it was, the two gentlemen, who was the Wall? The Wall?
Joey Wall.
Wall. He was a rather young fella, but, certainly, up to date or aware of what was going on, or had to, that's his job. And I really felt like it was a love fest in the beginning, because this was the group that did the Wild and Scenic, and then they had isolated people who came up, and of course, when asked for an opinion, they just didn't, really think much about Wild and Scenic, because one particular person had some property in Calaveras and Amador, and, the Wild and Scenic was just not, conducive to what they wanted or what have you. So all in all, I thought the meeting went well. And
Okay.
so it was well attended. The town hall in McCollum Hill was full, and so,
Thank you.
yeah.
There was a brief discussion earlier about the possibility of changing some dates around in May. I just want to point out that I cannot be at a meeting on May the 2nd. If the object is to move that meeting, I will be here, or I will be here.
Okay, noted. All right, item 8, next board meetings, we're going to be meeting here Wednesday, March 14th, 1 p.m., and following that, Wednesday, March 28th. So our next board meeting, we are going to move into closed session for item 9A and 9B. 9A is conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, La Catena Investors versus CCWD. And then 9B is conference with legal counsel, initiation of litigation, potential one case. So we'll be back to report on any action.
If we could, how long do you think closed session's gonna take?
First, I don't think that long, the second one should be yellow.
Okay. If we could at least possibly get in there, I'd appreciate it, because I'd like to leave at 3 as well.
I have time afterwards.
Twenty-ninth of March, the day after this board approves whatever they approve.